Hello, Suzanne Kellner-Zinck, Dawn Visions Hypnosis here to talk to you folks back in the United States, since I don't live there any longer, about how frustrating it is to read so many posts with people complaining endlessly about how their lives suck. They'll go into an entire diatribe about how it is that they're being hurt, they're being abused, they're not being understood, no one's hearing them, or whatever their problem is. And I go out of my way to explain A, what may be going on with them, B, what I can do to help them, based on C, the work I've done to help other people over the last 25 years plus. To have them do nothing with that information. Zero, zilch, nothing. People, help doesn't happen on its own. You have to trust somebody to help you. Hopefully somebody who has vast experience who can prove to you that they've succeeded in helping people like you. My website, because I'm not a licensed person, is full of testimonials of people like you who have been dealing with incontractable depression, dealing with feeling shame, guilt, people with eating disorders, anorexia and bulimia. I've innovated in that area thanks to, three clients in particular in the very beginning of my time working with this group, because the so-called licensed professionals made their lives worse. Not better, worse. And they do that because they're dealing with the symptoms. The fact that someone's not eating enough or is eating too much is not the problem. The problem is, why are they eating next to nothing or too much and then purging? Because there is always a cause to a problem, a reason for it developing, and a purpose for holding on to the problem. And in the area of eating disorders, it goes something like this. I loathe myself. I feel unworthy of love or anything for that matter. And therefore, my subconscious mind developed this way of helping me feel at least in control of this part of my life, even if it's totally out of control, meaning they know that they're harming themselves. And when they realize they're harming themselves and they're not getting the help they need, that is when my clients call me. I don't know how else to put it. The licensed practitioners, because of the HIPAA laws, they're not able to share their case histories. I don't have a license. I'll never have a license because I believe that no one wants someone going into the brain the way that they think, especially subconsciously as a hypnotist does, without being able to know for sure that someone like them, at least one if not several, have been helped by that person. Because frankly, isn't that how you figure out great restaurants to go to, movies worth seeing, things to purchase? It's by reviews, testimonials of other people who have already purchased and used the product or service. But yet in mental health, you're not allowed to do that. You're just supposed to, I don't know, trust that this person, because they have a license, is able to help you. Why? Under what circumstances? Because I can tell you that sadly, if you go on Quora, or if like me, you answer a lot of questions on Quora, almost 4,000 to date since 2017 when I started writing on there, I've had too many psych patients complain about not being able to find competent, they're not even asking for good, great, wonderful therapists, just competent therapists. And that's a problem within the mental health system. And I'll tell you what I know from being involved in it for 32 years, over 3 decades. Number one, you have a lot of people who get into the business because, well, they want to find out more about what's going on with them and their family dynamics because they know that they came from a kind of weird family. 2, they might have been diagnosed with some problem and then they decide that they're going to help other people with the problem. Actually, that happens more often with people who, like me, are in services other than the traditional, conventionally trained mental health providers, or for that matter, physical care, doctors, nurses, those type of people, because they got into a system that hurt them more than it helped them. And that was certainly true in my case, where I had really excellent therapist, without a doubt, but she wasn't able to get rid of the problem. I had a really great psychiatrist who understood that I had great gifts and talents in working with people with mental health issues. So I was working with them as I was working with her, as I was learning the ins and outs of working with mentally ill folks and seeing if that's something I wanted to do. I used to leave my last 10 minutes of my session to ask her questions regarding clients to make sure that I wasn't going to do anything to harm them further. I wanted to help them. And she greatly respected that and realized I had a gift for this and thought I should be a psychiatrist, which I laughed. I said I couldn't even make it through nursing school. Why do you think I'll make it through medical school? That won't happen. And there were a lot of reasons for that. Most especially, I hated nursing. I love learning all the prerequisites in terms of how the anatomy and the physiology works and the different things about psychology. There were two classes in particular that were very helpful: abnormal psychology and life cycle psychology, where I learned really how the emotional growth and development of the brain happens over a person's age, I guess is the best way to say it, so that I could help my clients who have been in some form of addiction be able to learn how to interact with people of their own age appropriately while setting healthy boundaries for themselves and, shall I say, respecting other people's boundaries as well. And then the other problem, and this came up from a very respected gentleman on CAR who was asked this very question about incompetence of therapists. And he said, the main problem is quality control. They do not have enough oversight while they are working as students. They have next to no oversight when they're working as professionals. So no one is making sure that what they're doing is actually helpful, if not harmful, to the patient. And that's a sad story. And this is a man who's semi-retired and has been in the field for 30, 40 years, something like that. I mean, a true pro. And then lastly, there was another guy who I totally respected. He was a social, I think he was he wasn't a psychologist. He was a social worker on LinkedIn many years ago when I was a member of what used to be active groups that are no longer active for whatever reason, centering mental health. And this gentleman said that the real problem that we have is that a lot of the safety guidelines, shall we say, are not there really to protect the patient. They're there to protect the provider, the mental health provider. And I can tell you that's true because I can't take credit for finding this article. I can't find that article, which is really pissing me off to no end. But while I was doing my public policy degree in medical sociology, one of my classmates had found a really great article that explained that they'd done the prior research on this, and that's a fact. So you think that all these things are in place to help the patient, but you know what? Nobody knows what happens in the room between the therapist and the patient. Nobody. Confidentiality. It can go both ways, people. Let's be real. And I'm a real person who speaks facts. I'm not into superficial bullshit. I'm not into placating people, most especially my clients. And they know that because they get to go through all the crap that they have to go through in order to learn and grow and move away from their dysfunctionality. I hold them accountable to make that stuff happen, which is why they heal, even if they hate me for a while, which they know going into it that they might, because I tell them as prospective clients before I even hire them as clients that this may happen. And they have to go with it because that's how they're going to learn how to interact with the people out there in their real world. They have to learn going through me. And yeah, I will misinterpret things, as they say at times. I try not to by asking if what they said is what I'm understanding them to say. And if it isn't, to state it in a different way so I understand it. Things happen. It's a relationship. So we have to be apprised of that before we go into it and never believe it's just about allowing my clients to be the perpetual victim, which is really the mentality of mental health, because too often they'll take the side of the client and they never hear their spouses or their kids' side of the story to get a balanced understanding of truly what the dynamic is within the family. You can't help people this way, people. You have to find out the bigger dynamic within the ecology that that person is living so that you can help them to better interact with each of the players, take responsibility for their part in it. And I have a great example of this where I was working with a blackout drunk who blamed her husband for all the problems in their family. And her two twin sons, 16 years at the time, were yelling at me through the computer, because all my work is done online, what a bitch their mother was, never taking responsibility for anything, causing all kinds of arguments, pissing off everybody in the family. She was the problem, not the husband. Now, I'm not going to allow him to get off easier either, because he was basically, shall we say, well, he didn't really treat his wife like a wife, all right? She was a sex object as far as he was concerned, and that was wrong as well. So you can understand there was a more complicated dynamic here than just listening to the wife's side of the story or just the husband's side of the story. And until we understand both perspectives, we really can't help the client to take responsibility, learn and grow, and move on in life with or without their spouse, depending on the healing that each is willing to do. Because I'm not in control of that. I can only facilitate the healing to the degree that anyone will allow me to facilitate their healing. But I work really hard to screen out the people who are not a good fit for me because my integrity and my reputation is based on the success, not on the failure, which means that if someone's not ready to invest the time and the money necessary to be healed, I can't do anything for them. If they don't fall within my scope of care, I do not work with people with IBS and other physiological problems. I leave that to the providers who are really good at that. There are certain hypnotists out there who specialize in things like IBS and other physiological gut problems and all kinds of stuff. But that's not my thing. So I don't do that work. I work with people with emotionally based problems. And sometimes an emotionally looking based problem is not an emotional problem at all. It's a physiological problem. And thanks to the nursing school education I did get, understanding how the physiology of the body works, I can figure out usually that it's not a psychological problem, it's a physiological problem, and that I can look up the providers in their area, the functional docs, integrative docs, that they can go to get a full assessment of what's going on with them, because it could be a malnutrition thing if their body is not able to, for whatever reason, metabolize the proteins that are the amino acids they need to develop their neurotransmitters for emotional regulation and mental clarity. Or maybe they have toxins, because if you're living with black mold in your house, especially if it's behind the wall and you can't see it, that can cause a lot of emotional type of problems as well, like anxiety and sometimes depression, along with the other problems that they feel with the aches and pains and stuff that goes with it. Or they could have hormonal imbalances. And we've all heard of menopause, perimenopause, premenstrual issues going on. And we have to know how to assess those problems. I know in my case, I went through a horrible menopause. This was after, I don't know, 6 years after I had a uterine-only hysterectomy because I was growing fibroids and they took them out and they grew back. So I just had them take the organs so I wouldn't have to deal with that disgusting, painful situation ever again. It was the best thing I ever did in my life. And yet I had friends who were sitting there telling me that that was an emotional problem. No, people, it was an emotional problem. It was a physiological problem that needed hormones. And thank God I had a compounding pharmacist right down the street from me, to whom I actually sent 2 nurses that also were going through menopausal problems to have their hormones correctly tested and then given the compounded bioidentical hormones so they could be on their way, as an example. So this is not seriously difficult stuff to figure out, but you do have to have an understanding of how the body works, how the mind works, and what is the difference between an emotional, brain-oriented problem, a gut problem, or maybe it's a combination of both. I had a gentleman who was referred to me for smoking cessation by his wife. His bigger problem, however, was being on statins that were going through his brain. What do you call it? the blood-brain barrier. And often when people find themselves on statins and they're not able to think clearly anymore, they don't know how to do the things that they were doing. This is what this particular client was having a really hard time doing his job that he'd been doing for the past 20 years. It was due to the goddamn statins. Would his idiot wife listen to me and get it tested? No, they never got it tested. So I'm sure that he just degenerated. And that was the situation because, she knew everything because she was a psych nurse. No, if you're a psych nurse, that doesn't mean that you know anything about anything. Not really, in my estimation, especially when it comes to medication-involved side effects. Because the only people who really understand those, if you're lucky, are the pharmacist. And I bless my mother for letting me know at a pretty early age that if you have a problem, you need a medication, you need to talk to them first because they understand the chemistry, they understand the side effects, and they understand how that stuff's going to interact with other stuff that you're taking. Be it, shall we say, holistic, herbal type stuff, so-called natural. Not that that shit can't cause problems. Yeah, think about poison mushrooms and other such things that can kill people. And vitamins and minerals, of which there's too many people selling supplements when they have no comprehension of the synergy between the vitamins and minerals and when it can be problematic. And when the person has too much in their system, if you're taking fat-soluble vitamins and you have too much of them, they can be toxic. Do these people know anything about this? Do they educate their clients about any of this? I don't think so because they've never learned it. They're just taught the marketing by the businesses that they represent, most of them MLM type things. Whereas I would much prefer my clients go to an integrative doctor or functional doctor. Integrative, they really mix between conventional medical stuff and functional stuff, and then functional doctors just work at stuff. They just look at the whole body as a system that, well, let's just say it this way. Several different systems of the body, your circulatory, your nervous system, et cetera, all work together to create either your health or your illness, which is really the only way to work with human beings. Frankly, you have to understand that dynamic. And people with mental health do not. They never think to even learn about that stuff. They just learn a bunch of theory. Most of it is useless. And that's why we have really lousy results when you go to a mental health provider, because this is the deal. It's set up as a system to keep you on drugs, mind-altering drugs, for as long as you're sick, which is, as far as they're concerned, forever, because all you can do is manage your symptoms, especially if you have a DSM diagnosis, which has no evidence behind it at all. It is created by members of the American Psychiatric Association, each taking a bunch of the diagnoses and then breaking them out into observational symptoms. And they have like a checklist. And if you check enough of the things off a particular list, you get that diagnosis. There's no evidence behind it whatsoever. Do not allow anyone to tell you differently. I have researched this stuff up and down as part of my public policy medical sociology degree. And by the way, it started with a little over 100 diagnoses, and now it has over 300. So do understand that they're creating diagnoses so that they can sell ever more drugs to you, creating new names of perfectly natural emotional situations that people need to learn how to self-regulate. That's what they did in the old days before the Flexner Report in 1908, which was basically paid for by the titans of commercial business at the time, the Rockefellers, etc., who knew that if they had patented medications, they could make a shitload of money with a pharmaceutical company. So what happened was they had this guy Flexner, who was an educator. He wasn't a doctor, but yet he was told to go to all these different medical schools. And he is the reason why naturopathy and homeopathy and a lot of the more natural ways of working with people, those schools were shut down, and only the so-called biological medical model was to exist. And they trained doctors in this way, and that's why we have the system that we have today. And the insurance companies came in and made it worse because they get between the doctor and the patient. They know nothing about the patient and what the patient needs. And it's particularly frustrating for the folks who are in mental health, because how do you explain to an insurance adjuster what the hell is going on with your patient? It's very difficult to do. And they don't care. Oh my God, the mental health people have to spend so much time arguing to get payment for sessions they already gave to their patients because they feel bad for the patients, the situations they're in, and they have to fight over everything. It's ridiculous. Waste of time and money. And I think medical insurance needs to be gone, totally gone. Just let people pay with their own money like they used to do to the provider. And if they have little money, like my dad used to do, he was a dentist for 31 years, he would set up a payment plan for the people that they could pay. And in some cases, they couldn't pay. And he didn't care because he was there to serve his community. He made enough money off the other people. It didn't matter. He took care of 5 kids and a stay-at-home mother. No problem. So these are the realities and the practicalities of mental health and the medical system in general. But this is the other thing. If you're looking for help and you're unwilling to pick up a phone or set up a time on a computer when you can actually have a conversation with somebody who's kind enough to actually give you a free consultation, because generally you have to go to a session with a licensed person to have a meeting or two to see if they're your person, I offer it for free. Why? Because it needs to be a situation where the prospect realizes that I am there to screen them in or out of the practice. I'm not there to just take their money. I don't have any reason to just take their money, because if they don't do well with me, the internet is there and they can talk all over the internet about how I sucked and how I didn't help them. So I have to be really careful about this in this day and age. And I wish a lot more people would take that under consideration as they do their work, because that's the reality of the internet. Your reputation is only as good as what it is based on what people say about you. So you have to make it rock and roll and do the right thing for the right reasons. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it does mean that you need to be realistic and realize that if you're having a really hard time in your life, you need to go somewhere to get the help. If someone's offering you a free consult, take advantage of the situation, see what can be done. Stop ignoring it. And if you're not into that, make appointments with people and find your person. It might take you 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, according to some people on Quora, to find your person. But when you do find the right person, it's definitely worth it, even if they can't totally help you. And I think back on the 15 years of my psychiatric work I had like 4 psychiatrists over that time, but one of them I stayed with for 13 years. She was that good. And she was respectful. And she really respected my gifts and talents. She understood it for what it was. She wasn't like another psychiatrist who told me that I was absolutely insane and basically in a fantasy world thinking that I could get a doctorate in psychology. And I'm actually working on a doctorate in psychology. And the really ironic part about that is all I do is argue about how all their theories are a bunch of bullshit. But that's a different story for another day. So, and that's based on 32 years of being in the mental health world, both as, well, more than that, as a patient. I go back to 1989, I think. And then I was chemically healed with lithium in 1993. And then I got all the shit, didn't have to deal with a psychiatrist, thanks to Todd James. I bless him. He's in the heavens somewhere. He died a few years ago, Parkinson's disease. 5 minutes, timeline therapy, boom, done. Yeah, my psychiatrist did follow me for 10 months just to make sure I was okay. I'm not an idiot, people. If you're in this situation, you know that crazy things can happen if you withdraw off drugs and you don't do it correctly. I was on a tiny dose anyway at that time. But nonetheless, it's always better to be, shall we say, careful than idiotic, especially if you're here helping other people. You need to be the person that you want your clients to be, right? And if you're doing anything different as a practitioner, well, best you get out of the practice, because if you're not able to take care of yourself, you sure shit can't take care of anybody else. Just saying. Anyway, I hope you got something from this and have yourself a wonderful life. Bye-bye.